Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. Today we're back looking at the Dutch aviation tech tree with Super Cacti and Soldier 676. Today we're going to be going through the rank 3 of it, and it is a little bit bare bones, I think, when it comes to what is going on. There are a lot of foreign vehicles, but were obviously used by the Dutch, and we'll try and give you some historical info on some of them. Some of these vehicles as well have also not in the game, so therefore if they wanted to add them in a capacity for the Dutch and not for those major tech trees, like they've done in the past with other tech trees, I think it's not a terrible idea if you wanted to promote a tech tree like this. The first vehicle we're going to look at is the Fokker G3, or the Antwerp 186 that you see here. So let's get started. Super Cacti, what do you know about this machine? Is the information limited? Is it a build of the G1? What's going on with it?
Well, the Fokker G3 design is, well, there's not a whole lot of info known about these, and that's a trend we'll see quite a lot in the rank 3 area. We have a bunch of weird, wonderful designs where we don't really know a whole lot of them. But what we do know about the G3 is that the nose is exactly the same as that on the G1. So this is most likely eight 7.9mm machine guns firing forwards. When we look at the picture, it most likely has a rear gunner on the top as well. But honestly, that is kind of where the information ends. When we look at the aircraft's design, it has a single tail instead of the twin boom design the G1 uses. Yeah, but honestly, it's a further development of the G series of aircraft. So something that these aircraft usually have is good performance, so high top speed, things like that.
And moving on from the Fokker G3, we start with one of our American brothers, the Grumman S2F1, and also its Canadian-born friend, the CS2F1. So how did the Dutch use these, Soldier, or when did they pick them up? And was this another one of those Dutch East Indies ideas, or was this more of a post-war idea going forward, Soldier?
So we operated two carriers, as I mentioned, and one of them, the more modern carrier, did use these. So these are more like reconnaissance naval planes that have like the armament to kill ships if it has to, but it can't really defend itself, nor can it like actively engage planes. So yeah, we did use them as like the marine in the marine compartment, or the MLD, and we used these quite a lot. And so we don't have this in game yet. And I guess there is some sort of good reason for it, since it wouldn't be that great. But it would be a cool naval aircraft, like purely naval centric. So if they want to promote naval even more, they could add these in either the American tech tree or go through this and add them in the Dutch tree.
Yeah, these aircraft are kind of interesting because they're kind of similar to the Canberra in a way, or at least the first Canberra, where, as you said, no guns, so no real offensive armament apart from torpedoes and depth charges, but it has an incredibly powerful radar on it, which would definitely be something to behold. The next vehicle is the Fokker Antwerp 187. So what's going on with this one, Cacti? It looks very similar to the Fokker G series, but obviously I'm guessing it's slightly different.
So if you compare this one to the previously mentioned G3, the Antwerp 186, this is of course the 187, so one number higher. This one is very, very similar to it, but I could not find any reference to this one being linked to the G3, which is oddly. But something that this aircraft has that the G3 doesn't is this one has different engines. If you compare the two pictures, you'll see a difference there. These are most likely inlines, while the G3 design has radials. And also something that's different is the cockpit design. This one seems to be all glass, maybe supporting some sort of an observation role for this aircraft. But honestly, like usual, we don't have a lot of information on these. But still, I would say the weaponry is about the same. Performance would also be about the same.
It definitely looks much more, from an observation point of view, a hell of a lot better. You'll be able to see a lot more of the sky with this setup, so I don't know, we'll see if we can find more information on it. And now we're into some interesting looking machines with the Fokker G2 or the Antwerp 198 or 199. With those incredibly low engines, what's going on with these vehicles, Soldier? Why do they look so odd?
So the G2 obviously was a further development on the G1, and the 154 was the one that was actually like chosen to be built, which kind of means that these were the rejected ones. So yeah, these are like really weird alternative designs for the same aircraft. So yeah, again, not a lot is known about these specific designs of the G2. Like all the info I have is like on the 154, the one that was under construction. So yeah, that's kind of it.
It's so weird at that point in time to have these underneath engines. I suppose the only other aircraft I can kind of remember which is similar is the XF5F, but even then, those engines are mounted higher. Moving on, we have the Fokker G2, which is sat in the premium area for this first line of the rank 3 stuff. So tell us about the G2 after explaining the G3 cacti. What's the difference between this and something like the G1?
Well, this one is also one of those wacky G2 designs the Soldier just covered. But this one has a more of a high or mid-wing design, so this one does not have the really low-mounted engines, which are just odd. But yeah, the G2, the reason why this one is a premium, this design, is because it's slightly different. And honestly, well, I really cannot say much about it. If we look at the nose, these G2s are most likely bomber designs because they have this flexible 20mm nose gun that we see on the T5. But yeah, that's about where it ends on these G2 designs. We really don't know enough.
Hopefully with maybe future digging into more and more archives or something, maybe we can find a bit more information on these Gs just to maybe get a brighter picture of what is going on with them. In the event area, we have the Fairey Firefly T2, which, as you can see, it looks like somebody has tried to copy and paste a Fairey Firefly, and, well, the machine has kind of malfunctioned halfway through. So what is the difference between this Firefly and a standard one, Soldier? Is this some kind of trainer version or something similar to that?
Yeah, this is a trainer Firefly. It's like like one of the Fireflies we did use multiple, and this was one of them that was operated as the trainer variant of the actual attacker variants. But it's one of those trainers that was armed, but ever so lightly. I think this one has like 2 cannons, whereas the normal ones have 4. So it's just basically a worse normal Firefly in that regard. But I think trainer aircraft in general could still work in the game. They would just be, worse and at a lower PR.
Oh, I completely agree with you, especially a machine like this. Like the T2 is a modified version of the Firefly Mark 1, so it should be, similar in armament, probably obviously a little bit heavier with the extra cockpit just strapped to it, but that doesn't mean that it would be surplus to requirement. I definitely think if we were going to talk about it in the way of some kind of event vehicle, it would definitely be would be interesting to see. So one of the issues with rank 3 is, as you can see, we don't have anything in the first fighter line, but that's okay because the second fighter line does have some stuff in it. Let's do the Spitfires collectively, just because obviously we have a bunch of them here. So we have the Supermarine Spitfires, the Mark 5B and 5C, not the tropical versions, the standard ones that you see in the British tree that were added when the Spitfires got a nice little update to their models. Then of course the Spitfire Mark 9. So how do these vehicles fall into Dutch hands, cacti? Where does their story begin?
Well, the Spitfire story in Dutch service started when the Dutch, of course, had to flee back to Britain during the war. Here, I think a couple of Dutch squadrons were set up, and we operated mainly Spitfires, but also Tempests, or Sea Furies, I should maybe say. But the Spitfires, I do not know which exact variants we used under British service, but some other Spitfires were also utilized by us in other parts of the war, but not during, but not together with the British. Honestly, well, when it comes to the Spitfires, there's not a whole lot I can say. If you really want to know what they're like, go fly them in game, I suppose. But yeah, the Spitfire, we Dutch did use them quite a lot during the war.
I do want to add that the five for the Spitfire Mark V were indeed used when we were in exile, basically. But the Mark 9 was actually used post-war in the actual, Air Force, mostly in Indonesia. So that one is the the most Dutch in that regard. And I do want to add that I found pictures of the Mark 9, the Dutch Mark 9, with two 250-pound bombs, whereas in game the current one we have in game in the British tree has only one. So that would be a difference, I think. So ours were mounted under the wings, whereas the one in game has it like under the central fuselage. So I think that would be a small little difference.
Yeah, and it would definitely make it different compared to the British one to see. But as Cacti said, all three of these vehicles are in the British tech tree. If you want to go through them, please do. They are incredibly fun aircraft to use, especially the Mark 9. It's one of the best Spitfires in the tech tree. Moving on, we have the Fairey Fireflies once again, but these are the standard tech tree versions. We have the Firefly F Mark 4 and the NF Mark 5. So what is particular about these variants of the Firefly Soldier when it comes to them? Once again, were these used in the war by the Dutch, or were these like post-war variants?
So yeah, this is one of those carrier-operated planes again. So obviously, as I said, we used two carriers, the last one being the most modern one. Either the old one or the new one, I can't say for sure. Used the Fireflies as just this standard carrier-operated plane. Like, I don't think I have to say too much about the Firefly. We already have one of these two, I think the 4, but I might be wrong, in the game. So yeah, it's quite standard. But I did like flying them. Plus, I downloaded like a Dutch skin on them, which made them way more lovely to fly.
And if you want to know the difference between the Mark IV and the Night Fighter Mark V, to be quite honest, there isn't that much of a difference. Basically, the Night Fighter version of the Mark V is very similar to the Mark IV. So yeah, not too much to go into really with that. Now we get on to probably the weirdest but most wonderful vehicle in this part of the tech tree, the Schelde S21. Why? What am I looking at, Cacti? What is this aircraft, and how the hell does it even work? Like, tell us its story.
Well, we could almost dedicate a whole separate video just to this aircraft, but I'll try to keep it short. So the manufacturer of this aircraft, Schelde, is a shipbuilding manufacturer. But they decided to branch off a little bit and thought, let's try to build some aircraft. And eventually they come up with the S21. This would have been an all-metal, multi-role interceptor ground strike aircraft that was meant for the Dutch. The yellow color, I think I should point out first, this prototype was partially complete, but it did not fly. The engine was never mounted, and I also believe the tail was not fully completed either. But yeah, this aircraft, all metal design, bulletproof glass, a big cannon in the front of the nose. It's a very, very interesting aircraft, and its design is just, it's something you see in the French tech tree with the Narval, if I'm correct. it's a weird and wonderful push aircraft design. When it comes to the weaponry, it has a 20mm anti-tank cannon in the nose. Some sources also say a 23mm Madsen, but this is it's either a 20mm or a 23. Also, it has 4 7.9mm FM machine guns in the front, and it also has guns firing backwards through the engine, because why the hell not? But even the guns firing backwards is also a big question mark, because it's either a 7.9mm machine gun firing backwards, or it's a 23mm Madsen firing backwards. We need to gather more information on this aircraft to really know what the actual weaponry was going to be, but it's one of these wonderful vehicles we just could not let out.
Yeah, I think comparing it to the Narwhal is a good thing to do. Obviously, the Narwhal was completely built and completely tested and everything, but at the same time, the idea of this aircraft is just very, very fascinating. And also the idea of having a gun point backwards and fire while also having a backwards mounted engine is just it adds a little bit of a spice to the life. It also reminds me of a French design where they had a kind of a very similar cockpit, and then on the back they had basically a glass canopy as well, and so you could see pretty much 360 degrees. It was very, very odd. The next vehicle to have a look at is another in the Fokker series. This is another version of the T. So what are these two about, Soldier? Obviously a prototype and then some form of updated model.
The T9 is a one-off built bomber, and I've heard some really odd stories about it. I think one even stated that it flew, and then when the war came, it wasn't actually operational. But yeah, this is it's just a really cool bomber. It has two pretty powerful engines, the Bristol Hercules, and it has machine guns all over the place, as you kind of expect. I don't have the bomb load state. Maybe I can find it really quick. But there's also this prototype variant, the prototype frame was the one obviously that was actually built. But there's also multiple design phases it went through, because why not? Why not design one version 3 times? The bomb load was 2,000 kilograms, which is pretty decent for, I think, its weight and general size. So the standard prototype one was, as far as we could find, the one that was armed with purely machine guns. But then there's the 1937 one that's pretty much the same, I think, unless Cacti might correct me, but I think that one is pretty close to it.
The biggest differences between the November of 1937 and the June of 1937, which we'll get to in a minute, is different engines and primarily the weaponry that was involved. So, like Soldier said, the prototype only had machine guns, a single in the nose, a single on top, and single on the bottom. But the November one would have different armament with a 20mm in the nose, if I'm saying it correctly, and then 50 cals firing backwards. So the main difference is engine and weaponry.
Interesting. It's always nice to see some upgunned variants of specific aircraft, especially when it comes to bombers, because obviously sometimes they do have a pretty torrid time in the game if they are left to their own devices. The last aircraft in the premium line is the Fairey Firefly F Mark 1. So does this have a similar story to the other Fireflies, basically, or why was this one picked as a premium over some of the others? Does it have a special story to it, Cacti, or is it just because it fits a little bit better?
Well, Soldier, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm correct, the Mark 1 was not used a whole lot by us. We mostly relied on the Mark 4 and the Mark 5. And while the Mark 1 is also in the game, it's not really the best Firefly, to be honest. So that's why I thought I'd stick it into the premium line. Just because it's a bit less than the others. And besides, having more Fireflies in the tech tree was really not needed.
Yeah, the engine power of the Mark 1 is where it definitely struggled. But overall, I would like to see more Fireflies just because of the really interesting combat and landing flap setup they have. Moving on to the next vehicle, obviously we already covered the Spitfires, it's time for the B-25s. Now these are two variants that I believe we don't actually have in game. These would be two separate variants to the ones which are located in the let's see, they're now in the Chinese tech tree, the Soviet tech tree, and also the American tech tree as well. The B-25s could also be put in other tech trees if they felt like it. I'm sure Germany and Britain could also have some of them. So tell me about these, Soldier. What makes these different to the ones we already have in game?
So yeah, the B-25 is one of the most well-known bombers, I think, around the world. Just a bit like the Wellington, I suppose. Everybody knows that. But yeah, we did produce quite a lot of B-25s, and in different compartments. Like some were operated elsewhere when we were in exile. Some were operated here. Some were operated in Indonesia. Well, what's now called Indonesia, at least. So the first one we're looking at is the B-25C. It has a strafer nose, which is like this nose that has machine guns in it, instead of like the standard bomber one, which would probably have like 2 or 1. So I'm gonna read this really quick, but yeah, this one is just better armed in general. There were like 4 machine guns firing forwards. There were like 4 extra machine guns on the sides, and it's just this better armed bomber than what we already have.
Yeah, it was basically the first B-25 that was took on more of an offensive role when it came to its front. Instead of just relying on its bombs, it also went for the gun idea and some upgraded engines. What about the B-25K?
As you can see, this is more of a Dutch one. So we converted the some other B-25s basically to the K variant, which had like 8 machine guns. So this one is even more armed, because why risk your life when you can have like a lot of machine guns, I guess. So yeah, one of us is still like doing, or did at least, had to quite a lot of research on the B-25 specifically, because it was just a mess to find out about them with like 8 different variants and stuff. So now we have a bit more of an insight into what B-25s we use and how they are. So this one is like probably the most Dutch B-25 we could have.
And looking at the next part of the tech tree, we have some more B-25s. Because, as we talked about, they were pretty much used by everyone. Now, I believe the one we have in the game is the J, so we can, miss that one. But we also have the B-25C and the B-25D. Now, it seems like the difference between the B-25C that we have here and the C in the other one is that this C was the one with the more standard nose, where it would only have 2 50 cals looking forward. But also the D version of the B-25, if I can remember correctly, it wasn't too much different from the C. I think it was actually the difference was that it was made in a different place. So this is one of those weird things when it comes to stuff like the P-51s as well. What you'll find is if it's made in a different factory, sometimes they'll give it a different designation, even though the fact is it is near enough identical. So we'll move on from them and just look at the next thing, which is of course the Fokker T9. So what is this vehicle about, Super Cacti, and why is it in the premium parts of the tech tree?
So this is another variant of the T9, and this one mainly differs in engine and weaponry, as stated before. What I said just a minute ago was actually incorrect. This premium version is the one that would have had a 20mm cannon in the nose, and then two 50 cals on the top and two 50 cals on the bottom, firing both backwards. The one, the November 1937 in the main tree, would have had a more rather odd weaponry of a 30 cal in the nose, and then a 30 cal on the rear on the bottom, but a 10.5mm machine gun in the top firing towards the rear. I've never heard of a 10.5mm machine gun used on an aircraft. But yeah, basically these two variants, the reason why this one's a premium is this one actually has more weight because it has larger weaponry, but I believe it has weaker engines. So it will be very well armed, but performance-wise, it's not that great. And to offer a bit of specialty, a bit of more of a punch, I thought I'd add this one in as a premium option for people to buy.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you hear, well, we upgraded the guns, and we're going to be carrying more weight, so we're also going to downgrade the engines. But it's definitely one of those things which normally doesn't go hand in hand, but every so often the decision is made. The last vehicle that we find in rank 3 is the Fokker T6, which looks very much similar to more of the, well, not modern is the wrong word, mid-World War II bombers that we're all well and used to. So what is this one about, Soldier? It looks like, I'm guessing it's 4-engined. What's going on with this machine?
Yeah, this was, well, later what I found out, this was like a little bit based on a transport/airliner aircraft we built. And this was one that indeed had 4 engines. There were like different options, so I can't really say, what one would have, been the most likely. In terms of armaments, here we also have a few different variants in terms of months, but we only have one currently in the tree. So if we're looking at like September, you have like 20mm Orlicon in the nose, a double 3-inch also in the nose, a 20mm on the dorsal, like on the top. You have a 0.3-inch on the lower side, and you have like double 3-inch in the back. So in the fence, it looks pretty alright. So you have also an August version with like really slight differences. So it had a 20mm Orlicon in the dorsal on the front, so it would have like this extra turret, I suppose. But yeah, it had a bomb load of 2,000 kilograms, so it's basically have a transport /airliner and try to turn it into a bomber, which we kind of already saw with the FK50. So yeah, it's just one of those. But again, this was never built. It had like a lot of specifications and stuff known, but it just never really went off the ground.
Yeah, there's a lot of vehicles like it, right? Like that take the transport idea or the post idea. The Farman, the NC. Then you have other vehicles like the JU-52, which even though there was a lot of transport versions, there was also a few variants designed to carry bombs. So seeing another one for that fact, I think is really interesting. Even though unfortunately the plane itself was never built. So looking at this part of the tech tree at rank 3, there definitely is a lot of what we would class as foreign vehicles in it, but there is also some interesting designs. Next time, we're going to be having a look at the rank 4 area, so there's once again a lot of foreign vehicles, but that's okay, and maybe we'll couple it in with some of the other stuff. Or actually no, I think what we'll do is we'll have a vehicle on the rank 4 stuff, a video on the rank 4 stuff, and then we might couple together rank 5 and 6. Once again, thank you to Super Cacti for joining me, thank you to Soldier 676 for joining me, and also thank you to Matrix for listening in. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyins Terry, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.